My name's Julia Peyton-Jones, and it is with enormous pleasure that I have the opportunity to talk to Alvaro Barrington on this Instagram Live for approximately 30 minutes. We met in his exhibition, A Taste of Chocolate, curated by Norman Rosenthal, at Gallery Today's Ropac in London, and we spent an hour together talking about his work. This planted the seeds of our ongoing collaboration, which amongst other things resulted in the Artist I Steal From exhibition at Ropac last summer, which we co-curated. During the planning of the show and the time since then, we have visited exhibitions, was the issue of the day, and began thinking about what either of us thought we could do in the future. Hi Alvaro, I'm just going to finish my introduction, then we can start talking. And hooray, you've got your tea.
I'm more of a coffee person, but
are you? Okay, great. And also planning now for Alvaro's show at Gallery Today's Ropac in Paris, which is most likely to take place at the beginning of next year. Alvaro is an artist with an international track record of exhibitions, and in addition to being an artist, his range of interests encompass many other things besides. He's a lecturer at the Slade, where he studied, concluding 12 years of learning on both sides of the pond. He is a writer. He produces concerts for over 3,000 people. He is a philanthropist with causes he supports wholeheartedly. He is engaged with fashion, and he's very, very knowledgeable about music. At the heart of it all is his fundamental desire for art to be part of the community and to make art that his family and friends can relate to. He has a scholarly appetite for knowledge and is passionate about what excites him. Alvaro, I'm just going to talk a little bit about your early years. You were born in Caracas, lived in Grenada. Is it Grenada or Grenada?
I'm dyslexic, so whatever I say is probably worse than what it really is. But I say Grenada.
Grenada, okay. Lived in Grenada with his grandmother until he was 8, moved to New York, came to study in London, where he's now based, moving between London and New York. So for the moment, your apartment is your studio. Has that changed the way you work? Has it changed your thinking? Tell us more about this period of the virus for you.
Well, first thing, hey, Julia.
Hey! So we're here.
It's like the world gets to be in our almost daily conversations.
I know.
And this is much more comfortable than the thing that I did for Lueve the other day, where I was like, what the fuck am I doing?
No, but I mean, the point is you were all on your own. I mean, you didn't have me to prompt you and say, yes, but, or what about, or, I mean, you know, it's very difficult. It's kind of weird doing these things anyway, but on your own.
It's a new world.
By the way, it was great in any case.
It's a new world. But how are you?
Good, really good. I mean, you know, I'm really laughing about this period where, for all of us, we're out of our comfort zone, including, if you could see this kind of incredible little, there's a sort of tottering pile of books, there's a couple of lights, there's a couple of iPads, and for me this is completely new, so I'm way out of my comfort zone. But you are a pro, having done the Loewe thing.
But you were saying yesterday about, what's his name, the fashion, Tom Ford, the lighting situation. You know.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow travelers, let me reveal. Tom Ford has done this incredible thing, which is for Instagram, if you want to look good, there are 4 steps you follow, which I obviously distributed to Alvaro, and in retrospect, Hans Ulrich. So I am, what, did you follow him?
Oliver or Hans?
No, Tom Ford, of course.
I don't have any beauty regime.
No.
I just, yeah.
Well, let's not discuss beauty in this Instagram. Let's do that the next one. And I'm happy to share all my beauty secrets for what it's worth. But listen, we must talk. We've only got a little bit of time, as we discussed yesterday. We've really got to get moving on. So you can ignore all my questions. We can start wherever you like. But we need to talk. I mean, I've got to do a bit of show and tell. I've got a bit of reading to do. your catalogue entry from the Steel exhibition, which I particularly like. And also, please, I've been asked to let you speak. Speak.
Oh, well, you had asked a question, and
Yeah. Well,
then we got off of
it. My question: from the moment your apartment is your studio, has that changed the way you work and your thinking? Please tell us more about the period for you of being in the virus.
Where do I start? Well, I started self-isolating maybe a month ago, because I was in my studio. I went to spend like 3 days in my studio, and my this person, Teresa, who I often collaborate with, had been there, but I hadn't been there for a while, and there was all these fumes in the air. So almost like I got sick, but I wasn't really sure if it was me just sort of being in a fume, like oil fume place, or if maybe I got the virus. But in hindsight, I realized I did get the virus, or I did have it. And while I was going through it, it was probably much worse than I actually was thinking about. But anyway, I ended up just staying home, and I kind of felt like the long story, but I just felt like the world was changing, and there was a lot of things happening, and maybe because I was talking to people in New York and a lot of friends and family. My family's from Grenada, so like Grenada is completely a tourism-based economy, so almost everybody lost their jobs. And then I was thinking about Brooklyn and New York, and people being either friends who were privileged and lucky enough, like I am, to like work remotely. All they're hearing is sirens, and then Teresa was saying how she lives by Wyckoff Hospital, and there's these trucks of bodies outside. And I just thought, man, the worst thing I could do is sort of go back to the studio and act like the world hadn't changed, or the world isn't changing, and then kind of just make whatever painting I was going to do regardless. And so I decided to, and also I was emotionally going through a lot. Like there was, if you call me, and you spoke about this a lot, but if you called me at 10, and it was similar for you, but if you called at like 10, I could be one mode, and at 11 be completely depressed, and 12 be like, okay, and it was just, and I just thought I needed to be honest to where I was. So it ended up like changing what kind of work I make. A lot of my works ended up just becoming small, intimate. I went back to like just pure representational drawings.
And also, a group of your drawings that you've made during lockdown are available to download on our website now. And not only of the ROPAC website, but all the galleries that represent you. And I'm going to show everyone the drawing, an example of one of the drawings that you made. Can you see?
Yes.
Good.
I just realized you were blocking your face as well.
And it's a this project because you've coloured in part of the drawing, but you've asked people of all ages to in effect draw with you by completing the drawings as they choose, and then send them to you. So you're going to, all this information is available on our website, so that you're going to have this incredible archive of drawings made by people during the virus, during lockdown. And you love collaborations, so this is the sort of ultimate collaboration. It's brilliant.
It's a bit outside of my comfort zone, but Teresa and I, it kind of spawned out of T and I doing like trades, and years ago I kind of started scanning and emailing each other when we were like both starving artists, and we kind of, I mean, she definitely still is, and then I just thought, well, what if I do this to, like, I had a lot of friends who have kids who are home, and I thought I could give them this drawing, and they could download it, or they could download it on the phone, or they could scan and print it. And yeah, it would be cool to see what people do, because a lot of us are just home. And yeah. So.
And we're all artists.
Yeah. I mean, we all are artists. Everybody. Yeah. So
that's another, so it's a wonderful project that really speaks to your idea to embrace the community and to kind of absolutely get everybody, people of all ages, engaged. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But
Thanks.
if we move on to your own work, your chosen medium is thread on burlap and not, for example, paint on canvas. I mean, these materials have a direct reference to your childhood in Grenada, where you lived with your grandmother until you were 8. And this period seems very dominant still in your work and what informs your work. Tell us more about that. Tell us why. Tell us how it's still so real to you.
Well, I mean, that question is important, but I also thought to go back a little bit, could we also talk about how this has affected you and because you're, you know, if anybody's been very busy and has a career being very busy, it's you.
Well, I mean, firstly, I should say that to read the news or to listen to the news is really so profoundly moving on a daily basis, because you hear the most tragic stories of individuals, groups, that are profoundly affecting. And I think that's why my mood changes so much from day to day or even hour to hour. And sometimes I feel, you know, this is such a privilege to be at home, to be working from home, to be with my daughter, and whatever the sort of the stresses and the strains of keeping family life going and professional life going. That's a detail, because, you know, we're coming into spring, the weather's beautiful, and so on. But it is a very strange and very disturbing time, not least because of the difficulties so many people are going through. And however, what I do find is interesting is how much more honest people are. They talk very much more honestly about how they're feeling, what they're doing. And often, in many cases, people have friends and family who've had the virus, and they know how serious it is, how dangerous it is. And for you, and so for you, it's how is it making art at home?
Well, this is sort of going to answer both of the question that you had asked before I interrupted.
No worries.
I think, well, one of the things that I hope will become apparent over time is that I don't really, I mean, I'm a painter, but I don't think I think I use material. It's not really about, I've used yarn as a material because conceptually it made sense. And now I'm using a printer as a material because conceptually it makes sense. And I think in Paris, the show that we're doing for ROPAC, it's more than yarn, it's all about materiality, because as a kid growing up, like in Brooklyn in the 90s and 2000s, it was like you had to be what we call fresh or fly, or, you know, just had the best clothes. And I was one of the kids in my neighborhood who, I went to school in Manhattan, but lived in Brooklyn and lived next to like all these high-end fashion, or went to school next to all these fashion brands. And so I would bring clothes back to my neighborhood that people never heard of, like Ferragamo or whatever. And I just remembered like looking up to my older cousins and how fly they were, how much they put things together. And so the whole show is really about like a kind of materiality. And actually it's interesting because I teach at Slade, right? And maybe I don't know, but one of the most brilliant students that I've ever like, I mean, she has, she's on the spectrum, and so she can't really look people in the eyes because it's very intense for her. And she's been making these works out of cloth and fabrics, and their bodies and shaped out of fabrics. And she was talking about, and I remembered asking her like maybe a question that was probably stupid, but her answer was the most brilliant thing that I ever heard, where she was talking about like, which is kind of why I teach, but I was like, oh, none of these figures, they're all kind of made of cloth. And I was like, oh, none of these figures have any faces. And it was at that moment, she had kind of very brilliantly revealed like her experience of the world as somebody on the spectrum is experiencing people's like clothes and people's body. It's not looking at their eyes and their facial expression. It's really about how they're presenting themselves to her. And I just thought, what the fuck? It's so brilliant. And in her work, she's creating a world that is about this sort of experience of her truth. But to bring it back to the show, it also was like how we, growing up, how we judged or carried ourselves. It was like, how fly could you be? Could you match that pair of Jordans with that pair of, with that Moschino jean or whatever? So it's really very much paying attention to people's body image and their clothes. And so that's sort of hopefully what the show ends up accomplishing.
Amazing. And what about music? Because music was very much part of all that too.
Yeah, music is like the barometer for how I judge art. It's like, you know, I think it's like, you know, if you put me next to a great Picasso or whatever, and then if you put me next to like a great Biggie song, then I hope that they do the same thing. Because Biggie for me was like, Tupac for me was like was the most artistic experience that I've ever really had. And then of course, like being someone who loves to be alone and be pensive and be in front of a artwork for 10 hours or 2 weeks straight without thinking, it kind of situates itself emotionally differently, but they end up sitting in the same place for me. So I always kind of judge my art based on like what music has done for me and what music has done to for my friends and the people I'm around, and how much it unites us together, how much you put on the right tune and it just makes everybody feel a certain way. And I hope that my paintings eventually get there. I hope it feels like that.
So do you listen to music when you're in the studio?
I listen to a lot of different things. I like, if I'm in an energy wave, I listen to the same song if it has like a certain pattern that I can kind of just play, and I'll kind of annoyingly, like you couldn't be around me, but I'll play the same song for like 3 days straight while I'm working on a specific piece. But I think this is also a Q&A for both of us. So.
Oh, Alvaro, no. People don't want to hear about me. They want to know about you.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
I've
got lots of questions, by the way. So we're really going to have to talk very quickly because I want to talk about that amazing concert, the family concert you put on, which was the first time I'd heard soca. And when I asked Peter Doig, who was there, you know, well, like, what's soca? And I could see him going, oh my God. Okay, let me explain. But it was absolutely incredible. And I remember when you first told me you were doing it, I said, oh my God, how are you going to pay for it? Oh, let do we fundraise? And it was like, you did the whole thing. It was completely cool. And you were doing that at the same time as you were curating the steel exhibition. So there was, I mean, massive pressure, which I never ever felt about the Notting Hill Carnival concert. But talk a little bit about that. Talk about that genre of music, which I know is only one of many that you follow.
Yeah, I mean, the concert was sort of like something else. Like, I just never thought, like, I thought I was going to graduate art school and then go back to Brooklyn and then kind of work with my cousins and friends to try to make art in an environment that I grew up in, which was like Brooklyn, our Labor Day parade, which is Notting Hill Carnival. And so that was sort of the intention. And then things started to work out with with exhibitions. And so I ended up, I kind of like going with the flow where things are going. You know, you don't want to resist too much friction. And anyway, so the concert was just something like I knew my cousin Fitz and other people. We were already kind of planning, and then over here I ended up bumping into and working with some folks who was like, yeah, let's get it done, and they were excited about it, and so we did it. But there's a long-term strategy in terms of like the concerts that we do end up being generating sort of profits for a lot of the people who end up like are part of the laborers of putting on Notting Hill Carnival, putting on Labor Day Parade, people who design costumes, how expensive it is to put on a truck on the road during Carnival. So it's a way to sort of ultimately allow the community that has given me so much to generate, to sort of generate income within themselves by like providing a service to people, giving them music, and then in turn the people pay and then it kind of goes back into the community. But yeah, it's just like, I mean, luckily I've had a great team. Like working even on the Steel Show, it's just, it's you, Kelsey, and me, and whoever else, a bunch of people. So it was really like, I mean, it was a team effort. All of these are a team effort. There's like the only way that.
I mean, of course, absolutely, it's a team effort. And in fact, I just have to tell the story. Well, there are two stories I want to tell. One is that amazing. So we arrive at the place for the concert, for the family concert, and I'm very honoured that you show me upstairs to the balcony, and there are lots of people standing there, and actually Alice also came with us, and then so it got going. Oh my Lord, the balcony was shaking, and the woman next door to me said, "Oh, do you think it's going to collapse?" I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." It was amazing. It was an extraordinary experience. But your paintings were part of that concert. They were on screen the whole time. I think something like 12 people, 12 different acts were singing, and also they then went to be on the float for the Notting Hill Carnival. So that immersion of your work and engagement with the public is very much part of what you do. And in fact, somebody's just asking what you're listening to at the moment, and you've explained how you get into a sort of zone in the when you're in the studio. But for your Instagram post on ROPAC, you have a fantastic track. So what are you today, this morning? What were you listening to?
Today I was listening to Wale. I'm not, but I think the thing, also one of the challenges that the reason why I did the concert and then put the paintings on the float, and then I think in Paris we have things that we sort of talked about, was because I always thought that like growing up, the first place I saw paintings were in the church, and the church was always kind of about community. And these paintings were, of course, part of the show at Sadie's here in London, and it was just, and I thought there's a lot of us who go to galleries and we love it, and we go to museums, but really that's a very specific crowd. Yeah. And Notting Hill is another type of crowd, and Carnival is another type of crowd. And I just thought, if I'm gonna talk or do things that represent like the Black people that I know, that the worst place, I mean, obviously, I just felt like it was important to put it in a context where they will at least see it or relate to it or say, man, that shit is shit. That was a really bad, I don't even know what the fuck that was. So it was really like about being imaginative about where art exists, and that art, we've kind of gotten into this place where, we have these sort of white Cuban, and I love it, but it's not really the only place that people are experiencing art. And I think part of my challenge is like making sure that my exhibitions are sort of always trying to really think about community in not like this sort of esoteric art world space, but like in what happens when you walk out the door or go to a concert, and hopefully I get more inventive, smarter about it. But yeah, but it's a long road, and I'm excited to be on that road. So I'm not like
fantastic. Because it combines two things that are your passion, which is music and art. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So one of the things, there are many things that make you unusual, but one of them is that you work with a number of different galleries. I think 6 at the last count, but it may have grown since I last looked. And why, I mean, it's a question that I'm often asked, which is, you know, why does Alvaro feel the need to work with so many different galleries to represent him? And it would be really interesting for you to just to explain a little bit about that, because I think it has roots in your past, but I may be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest lessons, so I'm going to kind of give it, I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions about it, so maybe this answer is going to be a little bit longer than we have time for. But my mom had passed away when I was 10, and a lot of her friends ended up taking me in, including her ex-husband, who had no money and no responsibility towards me. And I ended up growing up in this place where like all her close friends, who were all like nannies, would take me in for a weekend or a week or whatever. And for a long time, I was sort of upset that I didn't have to sort of, you know, have my mom, and that kind of ended up reflecting in a lot of different ways in my attitude. But much later on in life, as I was sort of navigating the world as an adult, I began to realize like, oh, this kind of attitude I got from Zelda, or this attitude I got from Julie, or this sort of way of thinking I got from whoever else. And it ended up reminding me of a kind of privilege that I had, where I got to listen to a lot of different people in my life. And that was sort of the truth of it. And so when I graduated around the same time, I mean, I'd known a lot of the dealers before, like, and in various ways ended up meeting different dealers. And there was each of the dealers I was sort of a fan of for very different reasons. And I was also a fan of their space for very different reasons. And just thinking about the art, it was like, I think here, for example, there's a very different energy behind going to Mayfair, which is next to Queen's Park, that has all these high-end fashion clothes and fashion brands and so on. There's a sort of different economic energy over there, even emotional energy over there, and political energy over there. And I thought the idea of like, you walk into a white cube, or like where Tommaso is down in the South London, which is in this residential area, you're walking through like social housing, and it's a very different energy. And I think one of the truths about an exhibition is that you don't just walk in there and all of a sudden all of the energy wave that had happened to you disappeared. The fact is, like, you are on a train, or maybe you bike, or maybe you're you walking through Mayfair, and there's a certain energy wave that you're carrying in, and I'm hoping that becomes equally material for what happens when you walk into the exhibition. And so there's because I know because there's, as a Black person, there are spaces that are more welcoming to me, you know. And maybe even as a woman, you walk into a room and there's like 50 men, you're gonna be like, oh well, maybe, you know, some people, or like and so for me, there's like, I'm very conscious of how spaces affect someone's energy. And I thought the space where the exhibitions are shown is also material. It's not just like the white cube is just this blank pure space. The actual journey to that white cube is a material for how you enter into the work. And so it's I mean, I'm very privileged in that, like, all the dealers today and all of that trust me, and luckily I've been you know, and I listen to them. You know, I try to be respectful of and try to be honest and say, hey, this is the exhibition. This is why I think this exhibition belongs there. This is the energy wave of the exhibition. I mean, I thought like the artist I steal from, what was so amazing, what I was excited about it for, is that today's space has this sort of grandness to it. It's not just like, it's like these beautiful stairs. Um, and I thought it was a space where just by writing on the wall, just by giving that little, you've immediately interrupted that space in a way that feels way more radical than, like, say, if I wrote on Emmeline's wall, which is like in the middle of Shoreditch, that has graffiti all over the front. It just emotionally, it's like immediately, you may expect it in Emmeline, and I think into this, it's sort of, you walk up these grand stairs, it becomes more of a kind of injection in terms of what you are experiencing visually and physically and emotionally.
Because it's interesting, you transformed, I mean, in the twice that you've shown at the Gallery Tedeschi Repack in London, you transformed them both times into a studio, in effect. The first one was from a show that you did at PS1 in New York, and it very much recreated. It was an installation of your studio. It was perfect for that 18th century room, the oldest building in the house. And then again, when we did the steel show, it was your handwriting. It then became yours. It was your imprint. And it was wonderful because you introduced us to artists that we didn't know, whose work hadn't been shown in London, and also divided it and gave us access to your thinking. To have the access to an artist's thinking is one of the greatest privileges that is known. Now, I'm conscious of the time, and I'm very keen to read this passage about the homework you were given every day. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends and fellow.
Julia, we didn't even I think people the 105 people who are watching us right now. Now I lost 5 people. Oh my God, as soon as
yes,
we've lost 5, we've lost
a growing audience. It
but
was
I
very, very funny working dynamic. So every day, Alvaro had to answer very tough questions about, are these artists you like, or do you steal from them? As all artists steal from other artists. And then his homework assignment was to write about how he stole from them. So this is with Kelsey and me every day we went through this. And I'm going to read you this wonderful passage about Cy Twombly, which Alvaro wrote. Drawing with a pencil is the most direct expressive form, and for many is connected to our larger culture, because we first learned to write using a pencil. Cy Twombly does many things with pencil, but I'm most inspired by the space he provides for action. Most of the surface serves as a space for the act of drawing, movements he easily shifts into when painting. In a way, he equates the paintbrush and the pencil, eliminating that false hierarchy between mediums. He always knows the exact distance to leave between one set of marks and another, which requires incredible restraint. If his canvas or paper were a movie, he would have known exactly when silence should lead to a loud bang. It's a beautiful piece of writing, and for me, encapsulates, so much of what Twombly is. But tell me, which of the artists you're looking at now?
A lot, but you know what I just realized as you were reading that? I always think about the time that artists are forming their identities. And around the same time, I mean, I always thought Twombly, a lot of his work felt very cinematic. And that was really his era, his age group would have been like a big moment that cinema, movies, was becoming like a big thing. Almost like when you think about like Lichtenstein or Warhol and the idea of the magazine being a big part of their identity, it just made me think, wow, I wonder how much the idea of the cinema and this sort of explosion and this expansiveness would have been like part of his psychology.
Well, I think I might have seen Nicholas Cullinan on the feed, who waved at us earlier. And if he's still on, he's the person who'll tell us, because of course He's, of all the people whose names I've seen, is something of a Twombly expert. But if he's not on, we can find out.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's an incredibly good point. And I think it's so interesting always to be pinned down and to articulate actually what you think and how you think. And I mean, one of the things about these tea time sessions is to find out more about the people I'm talking to. So to end, is there anything that you want to say to the audience about being an artist, or being an artist at this point in time, the responsibilities that come with being an artist, or what you want to say?
I think be present with people, with your family, your friends, and which is probably should be a truth regardless of what's going on. But I think especially now, there's so many people who I think mental health and the sort of feeling cared for, feeling like they belong, means a lot more right now than it had maybe 4 months ago. And it's something I'm also considering a lot. It's also like I miss New York a lot, and I think I've been thinking a lot about my family there. So I think and friends and people I really, really like. I love people here and everywhere, but I think if you be present as much as possible in this really important time.
Well, thank you so much, Alvaro, for joining me on this Saturday morning and for being such a wonderful collaborator on the work that we've done to date, but also the work we've done in the future. And really, it's a privilege and a pleasure and also great fun to work.
No, thank you. It's been one of the greatest privileges to be able to pick up the phone and talk to you. So thank you so much.
No, thanks to you. Now, we also, I hope everybody will look at your artist's eye that you did for the gallery as part of our series, which was posted on our Instagram feed yesterday with amazing music.
By Blind Benny.
Yes,
Jade.
So good, by the way, so good.
Yes, one of my favorite groups.
This is part of an ongoing series from the gallery and is shared weekly in our newsletter called From the Studio. You can subscribe via the link in bio on Gallery Today's Repac's account, and the newsletter includes other exclusive contributions from artists, such as studio visits during this period of quarantine. It's very important that we all stay connected at this point, and so it's wonderful, Alvaro. Thank you again for talking to me, but also thank you all who've been part of this great experience. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you, everybody.